Hello, my name is Isabel Alder, and today I'll be giving my presentation on my research proposal. When looking for a research topic, my first thought was attention and what affects our attention. I thought it would be interesting to see how caffeine affects our attention while driving. Energy drinks, coffee, tea, and even more caffeinated beverages are consumed regularly in our society, which may have an effect on attention. This is relevant to human factors because many people use these drinks to stay awake. These same people may also be driving or working with heavy machinery. They could also be driving themselves or multiple people to and from work. Sleep deprivation is very prevalent in our society. If there is a way to increase alertness and attention at work, I think it could be beneficial to look into. The first study I found focused on how caffeine affects our attention. This study, conducted by Lenini, Galderose, and Pompeia in 2015, specifically looked at how caffeine has an effect on attention and other cognitive effects. They wanted to see if caffeine could improve certain executive domains. These domains include inhibiting, updating, shifting, dual tasking, planning, and accessing long-term memory. For their participants, they found 60 males, all aged between 19 and 35 years of age. They did not include women because of how their menstrual cycles and contraceptive medications would react with said caffeine. All participants had a BMI between 20 and 25, no drug or alcohol use, and were very healthy. Their health was assessed through multiple health tests and doctor's appointments. This study was double-blind and placebo-controlled. All 60 participants were randomly assigned into one of four groups. These groups were placebo meal, caffeine meal, placebo fasting, and caffeine fasting. The amount of caffeine given to each participant was individually calculated through multiple questionnaires given to each person. Before their treatment, and the treatment refers to which group they were in and if they got their individualized amount of caffeine or not, the participants looked at a dot on a computer screen for 2 minutes. This allowed the researchers to collect baseline measures, heart rate, and pupil dilation. They were then given the treatment. 30 minutes after the treatment was given, the participants participated in multiple tests to see how the caffeine affected their executive domains. The result of this study showed that caffeine did improve attention and other executive domains. According to this study, caffeine positively affects attention while also decreasing fatigue. These next two studies are more like what my study would look like. The first study focuses on how coffee affects a person's ability to drive. This study, conducted by Metz, Bass, Van Boven, Olivier, and Verster in 2012, wanted to look at the relationship between 1 cup of coffee, which contained 80 milligrams of caffeine, and driving. For their participants, they found 24 adults, 12 male and 12 female, all aged between 21 and 30 years of age. All participants had a BMI between 21 and 30 and were all moderate caffeine drinkers. All participants were legally able to drive and were also very healthy. This study was also double-blind and placebo-controlled. Each participant drove for a total of 4 hours, which was split by a 15-minute break in the middle. The first 2 hours looked at how the person drove and how much attention they were giving the road. Tests were conducted after each hour. After the first 2 hours of driving, the participants got a 15-minute break, which is when they drank their 1 cup of coffee. After the break, they then continued to drive another 2 hours. The same tests were conducted after each hour to look at how the caffeine affects the participants' attention. The results, in my opinion, were not very surprising. According to this study, caffeine has a positive effect on a person's driving performance while also decreasing drowsiness. This last study is extremely similar to the previous one. This study focuses on how Red Bull affects a person's ability to drive. This study, conducted by Metz, Ketzer, Blom, Van Gerven, Van Willenberg, Olivier, and Verster in 2011, looks at the relationship between Red Bull consumption and driving performance. For their participants, they found 12 adults, 12 male, and 12 female, all aged between 21 and 35 years of age. All participants had a BMI between 21 and 30 and were all moderate caffeine drinkers. All participants were legally able to drive and were also very healthy. Yet again, this study was double-blind and placebo-controlled. Each participant drove a total of 4 hours with a 15-minute break in the middle. The first 2 hours were to look at how the participant drove and the amount of attention to the road they were giving. Tests were conducted after each hour. After the first 2 hours, each participant had a 15-minute break, which is when they drank their 1 Red Bull. After the 15 minutes was over, each participant then drove for another 2 hours. Again, the same tests were conducted after each hour to see the effects of the caffeine. The results of this study are similar to the previous one. According to this study, Red Bull consumption has a positive effect on driving performance. After looking at the previous 3 studies, it is pretty clear that caffeine does positively affect attention, not just while driving. For my own study, my hypothesis goes as follows. Those who ingest caffeine, specifically energy drinks, will heighten their alertness/attention while driving. For my study, I would find about 50 participants all aged between 18 and 35 years of age. I chose this age group because this is typically when people start going to school or working. I have noticed the more school or more work a person does, the more caffeine they consume. Ideally, I would like to have 25 males and 25 females in my study. Each participant must be a moderate caffeine drinker, which I defined as consuming 3 to 5 energy drinks per week. Each participant must have a driver's license. Although I did not include operating heavy machinery in my study, I thought it would be extremely interesting to look at how caffeine affects this in a different yet similar study. For materials, I would need a driving simulator, an eye tracking device, and energy drinks. I would use the Mini-Sim driving simulator. I found that this was the most reliable simulator for research. I would also use the Tobii Pro Spectrum eye tracking device for the same reason. The reason why I want to include an eye tracking device is to see what each participant is looking at any given time. This could show me how much attention they are putting on the road. For the energy drinks, I thought it would be fun for the participants to choose their own kind. Red Bull, Monster, and Celsius are just a few examples. Each participant would drink 125 milligrams of caffeine. My study would include 4 hours of driving with a 30-minute break in the middle. This is similar to the 2 last studies I talked about. Each participant would be set in the same track on the simulator with little to no distractions. These distractions may include music, eating, and other people. The first 2 hours of the study would show me how the person normally drives and what driving habits they have. I expect to see drowsiness around the 2-hour mark. I also expect the participants to have less alertness/attention, which could also be called zoning out. Tests would be conducted after each hour to find the participant's level of attention. After the first 2 hours, each participant would get a 30-minute break, which is when they would drink their 125 milligrams of caffeine. After the break, the participants would then drive another 2 hours. I expect to see more alertness/attention on the road. I also expect to see a decrease in drowsiness. The same tests would be conducted after each hour in order to see the effects of the caffeine. The expected results I would find are that caffeine has a positive effect on alertness/attention while driving, while also decreasing drowsiness. Thank you for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, you can comment them down below. Here are my references, and thank you again.